I can't believe I'm actually making this. So, due to a demand on Discord, after I sent a meme with one of the characters that I made, the video that I just uploaded before this, they said, oh yeah, Elliot and blah, 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 and I said, that's Elliot, not Elliot, 2 different spellings. And then they said, in response to that, I need a video from some anime YouTuber explaining all the Elliots in the current timeline. And I said, do you want me to make that? And they were like, yes. So here I am. So we're gonna explain them all because they wanted me to do it. So here we go. Elliot number 1 is, Eliott Astrofel, the alien in disguise that crashed down to Earth after a freak accident after he hit a meteor while taking driving lessons in his UFO. Elliot has a disguise wristband that he hides with his hoodie sleeve that he wears, that his big brother Eli made for him. We don't like Eli, but his big brother Eli made it for him, and so that's what he used to disguise himself as human. Elliot his name is spelled with Elliot, and it's sort of an alliteration on my name. My name is Elliot, and most of the Elliot characters are based on me in a way, shape, or form, which does come into the lore eventually. And then, a joke between the Discord community that I am in, Eliot the Second was in an alternate timeline. There's multiple of them. In an alternate timeline, there are multiple. The alternate timeline that exists in the server that this is based on. Eliot II was killed by Eliot I, who got mad at him for breaking a telephone that he had, which held some sort of supernatural power. And Eliot II now his spirit lives inside a box that Eliot III carries. Eliot III is traumatized by what he saw, and they're all essentially brothers in a way, but I'm going to explain this in a whole different thing. So the different Elliots in that timeline, this is the timeline from my friend's server. It's sort of like an RPG type thing with fighting and battles and stuff like that. It's really cool. I recommend it. It's called Skelia. But the Elliots in that, there's 3 of them. 3 of them are mentioned, and multiple have been mentioned as well as a joke, but there's only 3 of them. Eliot the First, the Second, and the Third. Eliot the First, in that timeline, in that server, doesn't have his human disguise, so he's stuck in his alien form, but he doesn't remember slaughtering Eliot II in cold blood. All he remembers is Eliot III screaming at him about it. This timeline is no way related to the timeline here, the canon timeline, but it is in a way related to the server timeline. Eliott is a spirit that lived inside of a touch-tone telephone. This may or may not be a reference to Spirit Fan. He lived inside of a touch-tone telephone for all of his life. Ever since he got killed, he was trapped inside of a touch-tone telephone to sort of keep him from getting revenge on his killer. And eventually, Cyril, who was from the video where Tom was on the floor, he picked up the telephone and tried to call the radio station, only to release Eliot from his mortal prison and ultimately get him out of there. Eliot has a human form and a ghost form. The human form has brown hair, very light blue eyes, kind of signifying that he's dead, and very pale skin. His ghost form has a ghost-like wispy tail, which is tipped with blue at the end and near his waist. He has a third eye, which is completely orange. One of his other eyes is orange as well. He also has this headband with demon horns on it, which I thought was a kind of cool detail. Eliott, or this Eliot, doesn't exactly appear in anything thus far, but I will kind of get onto him. I haven't introduced him to anybody, so if you are listening to this and you know me on Discord, congratulations, you got a sneak peek at the character that I'm still working on from, December? Or was it November? I don't know. But it was one of those. But yeah, he was trapped in a telephone, which was dubbed the Spirit Phone after his discovery. Again, a reference to the album. But it was dubbed the spirit phone after he was discovered. And because of this, Elliot is this sort of like roaming spirit that haunts the planet. He's not confined to anything. The only thing he is confined to is the touch-tone telephone. If someone, say, breaks the telephone, he would be free completely. But if someone picks up the telephone and like holds it towards him or touches him with the telephone, he will get, it's kind of like a genie kind of thing in a way. He will become trapped in the touch-tone telephone again. So, you know, if he's being a little annoying, just pick up the telephone and like slap him on the shoulder and he'd be like, no. And then we come to the one in the kill video, Eliot, or Elliot. All of them are called Elliot. He is, well, me. Elliot is me. He is a sort of reincarnation of myself in a character's body. Again, this comes into the lore type thing with the whole creator in a different body kind of thing. Elliot was left in an adoption center when he was at least like a couple months old by his real parents, because they couldn't take care of him, again because of the creator in another body thing. But he was sent to an adoption center. Now you see, I'm not adopted, I live with my biological parents. This is just for like backstory purposes, because like it kind of relates to the law and why he was left in an adoption center. So yeah, that happened. But he was left in an adoption center and was ultimately adopted by this guy named Chris and his girlfriend, who is now his ex-wife. Chris, at the time of adopting him, was 17. Elliot was 4 years old, and they lived together for a while. And when they got married, when Chris and his girlfriend got married, they took a trip to America on their honeymoon because they wanted to go to New York. They wanted to see all the stores and stuff like that. They wanted to kind of see the world. And during this time, the Area 51 raid happened, and Chris ultimately decided, you know what, I'm going to take part in it. And his wife got so mad at him that it ended up in a really messy divorce. Elliot remembers this, and he doesn't like looking back on the arguing, but he does help his dad with making music and his conspiracy theories. He stars in some of his music as backing vocals, or the pianist, or the synth guy maker thing, and sometimes even in the CD cover art. He is also credited in the back, in like the blurb of the CDs, and he's held up pretty well in his dad's music career. Now all 5, at least 5 variations of Elliot, they all either don't know each other or have some relation to each other, which again will come into lore. The reason why they're all called Elliot is because Elliot is actually a abbreviation of my real name, which I am not stating. But Elliot is sort of like this, like, I don't know, way of inserting a character that I can interpret as myself in a way, which is why on here you see me using Elliot, the alien in disguise, to kind of talk for myself. And this is gonna happen for a long time unless I change the character that represents me. Elliot, Elliot, is featured in a lot of the stories I'm writing, actually, from being this outrageous monster in a horror story to the alien lover that Eddie comes across in his school, or, I don't know, a sidekick to some detectives, so on and so forth. He's a very reoccurring character, and all of those variations in those stories all live in alternate universes, which do end up colliding at some point in the canon story. The reason why he's such a reoccurring character isn't because of unoriginality. There's actually a reason behind it. The reason is that I want him to kind of be a memorable character in a way that my stories are going to exist. And the reason why there's so many different variations of him is because I want his name to kind of stick with people, so that not only do I not forget he exists, but they don't forget he exists as well. And because of this, I've created a lot of different versions, but the main version is Elliot, Elliot. He's kind of like the main version that exists. but all the others, they do exist in the same timeline, in the same universe, except for the alternate universe ones. They live in an alternate timeline, but take some of my water real quick, but it's kind of complicated in a way. So the whole different versions of Elliot thing, which they told me to make a video about, I thought at first it was just explaining who they are, but then it kind of clicked, and it was like, what if I kind of tried to hint at the lore between these 5? So I'm going to try that. So basically, there is this hidden character that's locked away in the back of my mind that nobody has ever seen, but I have a brief idea of what they look like, or what it looks like. I'm not going to elaborate, but all the different variations of Elliot came from that one thing. And Eliot, Elliot, was the first one, and then there was the different versions of him, and then there was like Elliot with the 2 T's, and then there is actually another Elliot with 1 L and 1 T, which is just like a yellow and red demon version, but we don't talk about that guy. And then there was Elliot, the one in the Kill video. He was the most recent one that it created. The It thing isn't necessarily a prominent character, but it exists in a way, shape, or form, either putting itself into other people's bodies, or like a different character's body, or putting itself forward and making itself a little voice in people's heads, basically. It can be the narrator, it can be a character, it can be anything, and there's no way in telling, because the narrator always has some sort of name in my stories, whether it's Eddie, or Elliot, or Telno, or any of them. They always have some sort of name, so it's really hard to tell whether the narrator is actually it, and just reading from their perspective, or they are it, in a way. And the main form it has taken on is completely invisible to people, but it does exist in a way, shape, or form inside of all these different versions of Elliot that exist in this mortal plane, and all of them are somewhat aware of it. Some of them don't believe in it, some of them do believe in it, some of them contemplate whether they are it, and so on and so forth. And the only real way of knowing if it is there is if you come across it in your own way, whether it's a voice in your head or if it's a character that you're meeting face to face. There's no real way in knowing whether it is there in a story or not, and that's the fun thing about it. But back to the different versions of Elliot, they all somewhat know each other exists. They somewhat know that, oh yeah, so like alien Elliot knows that non-alien adopted Elliot exists, and they sometimes talk on like chat rooms or something like that. Sometimes they call each other, they've met each other in school, and that's how they got each other's numbers. The phone Elliot is just like sat there and he's just like, okay, yeah, these two exist and they just don't even acknowledge me, this is fine. The little yellow and red demon guy, he sells lemonade, and Elliot, and one of them was one of his customers, and so on and so forth. There's this really like big loop that you see of them meeting each other and coming across each other, and there's this big like loop of it. And this occurs anytime that I talk about one of these characters, is that one of these characters has had a similar experience to the other one, or the other one has had a similar experience to that one, and so on and so forth. And it's sort of like a bit confusing, even for me to explain. And if you're hearing this, I guess you were interested enough in learning about the different versions of Elliot that are most prominent to listen to me talk about it for this long. And you know, I'm grateful for that. I am grateful for you actually listening to my rambling about these different versions of this one character, and you know, getting sneak peeks and like hints and stuff, and it's pretty cool. But I don't, if an image for a character isn't shown and instead it's just their name, it's because I don't have an image for that character at that current moment in time. Like, for example, one is in a sketchbook, which I don't have with me at this current moment, but I will get it eventually. So yeah, that's this one. Thank you for listening to my rambling about all these different versions of these characters. it was honestly really fun and entertaining for me to talk about them for this long. And I don't even know how long I've recorded this for, so yeah. I smell food.